everyone. Today, I will be talking to you about why young people are joining ISIS. I know it's a heavy topic, and I myself have researched quite a bit on this topic, so here goes. I'm going to be exploring it in two dimensions. One, what are the sort of individual aspirations that these young people have in joining an extremist organization like this? And second, if they do in fact join this organization, can this organization help them fulfill those desires? As young people ourselves, I firmly believe this is something that we should be addressing, because this is an issue that our generation would understand better than any other generation. It's a strange phenomena, don't you think? One day you're just leaving school, you're graduating university in London, parts of Europe, Australia, anywhere around the world, and suddenly you're so much taken in with this extremist organization that you leave everything behind and you travel halfway across the world into a war-torn country and join a terrorist organization. It's an extremely interesting phenomena in the sense that we need to see it rather than a theological point of view, we need to see it from a psychological point of view. What is happening with these young people? They're not being kidnapped. They're going voluntarily. They're traveling all this distance for this themselves. And that's something that we need to address. So take, for example, these people. Amira Abbas, 15. Shamina Begum, 15. Qazida Sultana, 16. 3 London schoolgirls traveled through Turkey to war-torn Syria to play their part in the ISIS movement. Abdullah Al-Mir, also known as Abu Khalid, 17 years old, traveled from Australia to join ISIS last year in 2014, reportedly telling his family that he's going on a fishing trip. Or let's see someone closer to home. Arib Majid, also known as Asif Majid. He's 22 years old and he recently returned back to Mumbai after escaping ISIS from Turkey. So we can see that this is something that these young people are doing voluntarily. There's nobody sort of instigating them, or nobody sort of persuading them to join this. They are voluntarily traveling all this distance to join these extremist organizations. Studies have shown that the most affected group amongst young people are either 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds or 22-year-olds to 25-year-olds. So if you look closely at this age, what does this age group tell you? That these are young people in transitional phases of their lives. They're either leaving school or they are leaving university. And we've all been at that stage. I myself am at that stage. I'm finishing university in another 1 year, and I have no idea what's going to happen next. So it's when you're at this stage of your life, at this transitional phase, you are most affected by this ISIS ideology, by extremist ideology. From a show of hands, can I see how many people think that terrorists have something to do with mental disorders or any sort of psychopathology? Do you think terrorists have mental disorders? Raise your hands, those who do. Yeah, so we have a few. The long-standing assumption that an affinity towards terrorism has anything to do with mental disorders or psychopathology has been discredited. There is nothing to indicate that whatsoever. In fact, terrorism is viewed as a political preference that develops over a period of time. If these young people, who I had shown earlier, do not suffer from any sort of mental disorder or any sort of psychopathology, then what are the quintessential individual satisfactions they are hoping to achieve by subscribing to extremist organizations like these? So it breaks down to a personal significance. No, can we go back? Sorry. Breaks down to personal significance, identity, connection. I'll be leaving university in another year. I'm looking for personal significance, self-worth, self-esteem. I've studied a degree. What am I worth? Where do I end up? An identity. What do I call myself? A lawyer, a diplomat, a politician? Is there any identity that I can associate with myself? Connection. The people around me, do they validate who I have become? Do they validate my chosen path? So it's when you are thinking of these things that you're most likely to be influenced by extremist organization. Why is that? It's because extremist organizations view the world in sharp dichotomies. Everything's either good or everything's bad. Saints versus sinners. Chaos versus order. Liberation versus sacrifice. Everything's either black or white. There are no middle shades of gray. And what they offer is a quick and easy way to become martyrs and heroes. This is our cause. This is the enemy. Die for him. You will be remembered all your life. This is the fast method, and this is the fast way that allures many people. It requires conducive social conditions rather than monstrous people to produce heinous deeds. These people are not monstrous. They are just heavily misguided. And that is something which we will see. If they do join terrorist organizations, can they satisfy these individual needs of significance, identity, and connection? To make it a little more interesting, let's take the example of Mr. X. Mr. X is, say, 22 years old. He's a recent graduate from London, probably studied business management, has a bright future ahead of him, but is getting allured to the ISIS ideology and is thinking of traveling from London to Syria to join the organization and play his part. So what happens? Mr. X travels to Syria, goes to ISIS, and rather than finding any sort of significance and purpose himself, what he will be faced with is excessive cohesiveness, which is a common characteristic amongst many terrorist organizations. Because terrorist organizations are illegal in nature, they develop certain values, norms, and behaviors because they lead a clandestine lifestyle. They operate in threatful and dangerous environments, which forms a collective entity rather than an individual identity. So the organization functions as a whole, not as many individuals gathered together, which leads to what psychologists call de-individualization, which is a loss of individual expression. So if Mr. X is thinking of traveling to ISIS and join it, thinking that he will know more about himself and fulfill his own purpose in life, heavily misguided, because that's not going to happen. Another thing, what will happen, are the structural faults within terrorist organizations. So, as normal rational beings, what do we all do? We weigh alternative courses of action and choose the one that maximizes our own outcome. So for example, when I was applying to universities, I was making lists based on class size, the course, the wildest society parties, etc., etc. And then what happened? My mom came into the room. She saw the list. And she was like, no, this one is too far, this one's too expensive, this one's too hard to get into. Have you seen your face? So basically what happened was I got an outside opinion. What happens with terrorist organizations is that they are insulated from outside opinion. And when that happens, their vulnerability of making irrational decisions increases multifold. And that is something which will not be working in any sort of favor for Mr. X, who is on a path of self-discovery. Another thing what we have is the situational context. These organizations are illegal. They work under high stressful environments. And due to the illegality of these organizations, there is an inability to inhibit dissent from within. Members of the group cannot criticize the activities of the group, which leads to a phenomenon known as self-censorship. So Mr. X will find himself It's likely that Mr. X, if he joins a terrorist organization, he may not agree with many of the things that the organization does, but he cannot do anything about it. He has to be self-censored. So in a nutshell, we have Mr. X, who's gone from being a graduate in London with a prospective future to being an individual who's now de-individualized. He's lost any sort of self-expression. He is self-censored. And on top of that, he probably can't even escape and go back to the life that he used to. And that is one of the main reasons why once young people subscribe to terrorist organizations, they can never leave it. Because if you leave it, you're going to be punished from your government if you go back to your country. And if you are caught trying to leave a terrorist organization, you're probably going to face retribution from your own comrades. So you're stuck in this middle ground of a heavily wrong path that you have chosen in your life as a youngster, and there's nothing you can do about it. On the other hand, I feel, as all of us young people, we too are seeking these same things. We're seeking purpose, we're seeking significance, we're seeking some sort of identity and expression in our lives. And that can only come by working in pro-social causes or humanitarian work. There is no other way. It's a longer way. It doesn't guarantee success, but I assure you that upon reflection, you can find success. I've been very fortunate in my life to undertake humanitarian activities and pro-social causes since a very early age, since the age of 15. And be it working with African orphans in Melbourne, or working with victims of child trafficking at the Thailand-Cambodia border, or building greenhouses in Peru. I mean, at the time, I didn't know that these are the conditions I was satisfying in my life. I was merely just signing up to everything that my school offered and making my parents happy and making sure that my teachers and my project leaders are happy. But now if I reflect on those experiences, now after years and years, if I reflect on those experiences, I can see how they have perhaps changed my outlook, and they have changed the way I interact with people and have given me some sort of direction and purpose in life. Created an identity which I can call my very own. So pro-social causes are the only way in which, if you are confused in life and you don't know where you're headed, this is the only way that you can find out many things about yourself. But terrorism in the 21st century has changed quite a bit. We heard from the previous speaker that the internet is playing a larger role in the way we interact and communicate these days, and that's what these organizations are doing as well. These organizations are not only looking for short-term political power, but they are seeking to transform the world. They're using mediums like Facebook and Twitter and WhatsApp and reaching a population far beyond their organizational borders. So I feel that if we have to find a counter-narrative to the ISIS recruitment, specifically of young people, we have to do it at the same level. We cannot bomb all our problems away. Let's try and not be a generation that does that. Let's find a solution at the same frequency of communication that they operate in. Using your own experiences, if there's one advice that I would like to give you, is if you can use your Facebooks and your Twitters and your WhatsApps a little more than what you're normally using. Reflect on your experiences. How did you get out of times when you felt you were stuck? What do you think has contributed to your own personal development? Share it with the world. Don't just keep it with yourself. Share it. There is a big population out there to read it. They will be inspired by it. And for some, it may help them to save their lives and the lives of those around them. I'd like to thank TEDxJaiHindCollege for making this idea worth sharing. Thank you.